Good afternoon. Glad you're with us here on Newsfeed this afternoon. So confirmation today, it finally looks like food price inflation is very slowly coming down. Inflation for the price of food coming in at 5.1% in March. That's the lowest rate in about 3 years. The last time it was this low, we were probably under a lockdown. It also shows how food price inflation has come down from a high of 14% in March last year. I don't need to remind you of the impact that rising food prices have had on you and your family. Patrick Kelly is the Chief Director for Price Statistics at Statistics South Africa. Patrick, good afternoon to you. Okay, I realize we're all looking for optimism these days. How quickly has food price inflation come down? Do you see this figure as significant?
Yeah, well, certainly, as you indicated in your introduction, Stephen, the rate of food inflation is at 5.1%. I mean, that's down 1 percentage point just from February. So it is coming down fairly steeply. And as you say, in over 3.5 years, this is the lowest food inflation rate that we've had. We can look at some of the key components of that. So, for example, bread and cereals is also down to 5.5%. And in fact, there we see some products actually being cheaper now than they were a year ago. So like flour, pasta, rusks, maize meal even is actually priced now at lower levels than a year ago. So that's obviously very positive for consumers. If we look at meat inflation is really low as well, 0.8%. That's year on year. Normally we see those kind of figures for a monthly change. So that's down from, February last year it was at 11.5%. So, we have seen meat inflation really subsiding. I think the outlier on food is sugar, sweets, and desserts, which includes all the things that we like that we shouldn't like. So sugar itself, we see white sugar up 20%, brown sugar 22%, and then chocolate slabs up almost 18%, and chocolate bars up almost 16%. That's over the last 12 months.
It's interesting. I mean, there are lots of different things that can affect different prices of food. And if we just use chocolate as a useful example, if you have particular types of weather in Côte d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, where most of the world's cocoa is grown, well, then you're going to have a big increase in the price of chocolate. With meat, though, there are particular economics around meat, also to do with food and to do with the price of grain. What I'm trying to get to is that in the agricultural supply chain, as I understand it, lots of different things affect each other, and that can give you the result we're seeing now.
Absolutely, and probably it all starts with the weather and how good the rains are and what is the maize crop, because a lot of animals...
All right. Unfortunately, it seems we've lost Patrick Kelly in that conversation, Chief Director for Price Statistics South Africa. Important conversations, of course, to come around that, because we do want to hear more from him on that particular issue. We'll try and sort that feed out for you. All right, Patrick Kelly back with us. Patrick, you were telling us how interconnected so many of these different factors are, and I imagine it can be quite difficult to work out why the prices of some goods went up and some went down.
Yeah, so, I mean, look, our job in price statistics, we have the consumer price index, so which we're talking about, and really there our job is just to record what are consumers paying, what is the price charged in a particular store. On the producer price index side, on the other hand, we're getting that from manufacturers, from farmers, from the like, and there you can usually see with some delayed effect the impact of raw material increases. But it's not normally a kind of a quick transition, except in the case of things that perish like vegetables or fresh meat.
As stats say, you don't do predictions, you're not in the crystal ball business, and that's very wise of you. But is this reduction in food price inflation part of a trend? Has it been sort of heading this way recently?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we've seen it coming down over a period of time. If we go back a bit, in March 2023, which was a year ago, it was at 14%. So it has been slowing down over this period. I think the good rains that we had in summer certainly have helped, and probably some of the destabilizing effects, like the Ukraine situation, definitely pushed up grain prices at a particular point in time, and that sort of stabilized. So that's on the food side. I mean, we did see quite big increases in fuel costs. That's the other aspect or product that often drives changes in the inflation rate from month to month. So that jumped up by 5.3% just between February and March. We did see an increase in the regulated prices for fuel again in April, so that was really then obviously pushed upward pressure. How all of this plays through into the overall headline rates, that's a lot of moving parts.
You've also recorded inflation in various other parts of our society, including in education. I notice largely it seems education seems to be around the main sort of CPI mark, normal inflation. I noticed that the cost of sending a child to a high school is slightly higher, that inflation is slightly higher than it is for other institutions. I have to say I'm at a complete loss to understand why that might be. It may not be possible to determine why suddenly sending children to high school is a couple of points above sending children to primary school when it comes to inflation.
Yeah, look, so overall education inflation was at 6.3%, which is kind of around its long-term average. So that's sitting a bit above average inflation rates. And as you say, secondary schools increased their fees on average by 7.3%. So that's a whole percentage point higher. We don't necessarily ask the reasons why they change. I do think being a parent and also being on school boards, there's a lot of pressures on high schools to perform. They put a lot of emphasis as well on sporting activities, extramurals, making sure there's enough extra lessons to make sure the kids do well through matric. So I do think it's a critical point where parents perhaps are willing to pay a bit more to make sure they get a decent result.
There's the old story in economics that, people will pay, you must charge what the carriage will bear. In other words, you must charge what people will actually pay. We need to talk about transport, Patrick, and of course that takes us straight to fuel prices. And I realize we don't know what's going to happen in the Middle East. But certainly fuel prices have such a big impact on transport costs, and transport costs, of course, going up.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and the main driver there really are changes in the fuel price, both petrol and diesel, and they both went up 5.2 and 5.3% respectively, just between February and March. So we do overall have it's only a marginal kind of annual increase for transport, but we do also have in there the price of vehicles, and vehicle prices have been trending over 6% year-on-year inflation over the last number of months. So there are a couple of factors there as well. But as you indicate, the oil price really is the key driver of directly the transport index. The impact then of that to the overall kind of retail sector usually takes a bit longer to flow through, and it's obviously just one component of the costing of retail goods.
Patrick Kelly, thank you, Chief Director at Price Statistics at Stats SA. Really do appreciate the time. Well, interesting to see how it all plays out.